beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
Coming up on Arirang News. The Expo inspection team leaves South Korea wrapping up their week-long trip, saying Busan is amazing. Tonight, we delve into why the country's largest port city, Busan, should be the one chosen. For the first time in 11 years, South Korea in February recorded a current account deficit for a second consecutive month. Meanwhile, in the first quarter, Samsung Electronics is projected to log an earnings shock, but LG Electronics is likely to top Samsung for the very first time. Top nuclear envoys of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan today call on the international community to return North Korean workers illegally working abroad as it violates UN Security Council resolution. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. The country's largest port city, Busan, is where we start tonight. The delegation from the Bureau International Day Expositions, the intergovernmental organization that's responsible for managing the World Expo, has wrapped up its 6-day trip to South Korea and left the country on Friday morning. The 8-member delegation was in the country for an on-site inspection of Busan as part of the city's bid to host the 2030 World Expo. Busan is competing with Italy's Rome, Ukraine's Odessa, and Saudi Arabia's Riyadh. The inspection team is due to publish a comprehensive report on those candidate cities, which will be available to the 171 BIE member states in June, before the winner will be decided in November. Wrapping up Expo Week here in South Korea, our Song Yoo-jin, who's been covering Busan's 2030 World Expo bid, shows us the various charms of the city and why it should be the host.
There's the Olympics and World Cup for sports, and for culture and economy, there's the World Expo. South Korea has already hosted 2 of those global events, and throughout Expo Week, Arirang News has had the chance to explore Busan, one of the 4 candidate cities for the 2030 World Expo, and delve into why it should be the one chosen. First, the Expo venue.
The beautiful beaches and the ocean are some of the things our city is most proud of. So we're redeveloping what was once the largest port in Busan to transform it into the Expo's main venue.
Here, the north port of Busan is where the 2030 World Expo will take place if Busan wins the bid. Many areas are still under construction, but everything will be in ship-shape by 2030.
The North Port was the heart of South Korea's industrialization throughout the 20th century after it opened as the country's first trading port in 1876. Upon completion, the 3.43 million square meter venue, very similar in size to Central Park in New York, will transform into a cultural complex. Waterfront spaces will turn into plazas, green areas, pavilions, and leisure spots such as the proposed Busan Opera House. But even before embarking on its Expo project, Busan had already established itself as South Korea's cultural capital. This year, it earned a spot on National Geographic's top 25 travel destinations around the world. But what makes it so charming? With the early influence of Western culture, Busan developed a strong foundation in the film industry. In fact, it was the first Korean city to release a motion picture.
I think the annual Busan International Film Festival is one of the things that makes our city more attractive.
And of course, its breathtaking natural beauty. Hop on this beach train from Songjeong to Mipo for an up-close view of the crystal clear blue waters. Take in a panoramic view of the seaside from the LCT Landmark Tower, the second highest building in Korea.
Busan is extremely interesting and enjoying because of its unique beachside view and fantastic sky towers, beautifully lighted, nice flyovers, and other beautiful tourist attractions.
And when the sun goes down, the beach turns into the perfect stage for fireworks, so much so that the city has its own annual fireworks festival that draws in around 1 million visitors to Gwanghwanery Beach from home and abroad every year. But the biggest strength is the people of Busan.
I would go after almost 20 years in expos, and I have been on many, many inquiry missions throughout expos. I don't think I have ever seen such an enthusiasm in the local population for an event.
So with Busan having so much to offer, South Korea is determined to show that the city is indeed ready, right up until the Bureau of International Expositions picks the winner this November. 송유진, 아리랑 뉴스, 부산.
For the first time in 11 years, Korea's current account remains in the red for the second month in a row in February, hit by sluggish exports, those of chips in particular. Moon Hae-ryung reports.
South Korea's current account recorded a deficit for the second month in a row in February. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday shows that the country's account balance was in the red by $520 million. This is down more than $6.3 billion from the current account balance recorded at the same time last year. This follows a record high deficit the previous month. The goods balance suffered the greatest losses in February, falling by more than $5.6 billion on year to record a $1.3 billion deficit. It's the fifth consecutive month that South Korea's goods account has recorded a deficit. This was attributed to the sharp decline in exports, which dropped by $3.4 billion on year to $50.5 billion, a decline of more than 6%. The semiconductor and chemical goods sectors performed the most poorly. Exports of semiconductors fell by 41.5% compared to the same month last year, and chemical goods exports were down by 9.8% amid the economic slowdown. On the other hand, imports rose by $2.2 billion on year to nearly $52 billion. In particular, imports of raw materials such as gas and chemical industrial goods rose by over 7% compared to last year. For gas alone, imports rose by nearly 73% to over $6.1 billion. Meanwhile, the deficit in the service account, which includes earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, came to over $2 billion in February. The travel balance deficit more than doubled on year, from $430 million to over $1 billion due to the easing of COVID-19 restrictions, prompting more Koreans to travel overseas. It remains to be seen whether this will improve with more inbound travelers from China, and the Bank of Korea remains optimistic that the goods balance will also improve amid hopes of an improvement in the semiconductor sector in the second half of the year. Moon Hae-ryung, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics is likely to witness an earnings shock for the first quarter of this year, hit by weaker demand for semiconductors. Meanwhile, the operating profit of LG Electronics is projected to top that of Samsung for the very first time. Lee Soo-jin has the latest.
Samsung Electronics is expected to post an earnings shock for the January to March period amid the continued sluggish global chip demand. The company disclosed on Friday an estimated consolidated operating profit for the first quarter of some 600 billion won, or around $455 million. That's a decline of nearly 96% from the previous year. Sales came to around 63 trillion won, around $48 billion for the same period, plunging almost 20% on year. This marks the first time in 14 years that the tech giant's operating profit fell below 1 trillion won, or around $760 million. Analysts linked the sharp decline to plunging demand for semiconductors since the end of last year, resulting in lower prices in the chip market. They also expect the semiconductor division, which makes up 60 to 70% of Samsung's operating profit, to post a deficit of around 4 trillion won as its chip inventory continues to swell. Samsung responded to the ongoing sluggish demand for IT products by saying it will make adjustments to chip production. This is the first time the company has officially announced its intention to cut production, although exact details have not been revealed. The tech giant did say, however, that it will continue to increase investment in infrastructure as well as research and investment. Meanwhile, LG Electronics' operating profit has surpassed that of Samsung Electronics for the first time. LG Electronics projected an operating profit of 1.5 trillion won compared to Samsung's 600 billion won. Its operating profit declined almost 23% on year, but this was largely due to the one-off revenue generated from patents during the first quarter last year. Sales fell only 2.6% to 20.4 trillion won, its second highest first quarter sales. While both operating profit and sales saw an on-year decline, LG said this was a relatively small drop considering the downturn in the global economy. Analysts said the company's home appliance division benefited from a decline in the costs of logistics and raw materials compared to during the pandemic. 이수진, Arirang News.
South Korea's Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho visited Samsung's chip production line in Pyeongtaek on Friday, where he pledged full support for the chip industry. During a roundtable session, the minister highlighted the importance of the chip industry as it is an essential part in the country's economy. Chu expressed his appreciation towards Samsung's decision to invest around $227 billion in a chip cluster that is going to be built in the city of Yongin, while pledging more support in R&D, nurturing talent, and easing restrictions. He also said the government will cooperate with other countries in establishing industrial policies that can help benefit Korea's chip industry. In response to the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, the South Korean government pledges to provide support to local battery companies that plan to expand their businesses in the North American market worth over $5 billion. Our trade correspondent Shin Ha-young has the details.
More South Korean EV battery firms are expected to receive benefits from the government following Washington's release of further information about its Inflation Reduction Act. South Korea's trade ministry expects there to be no need for local battery makers to change their current manufacturing processes, as the key material used to make them is now excluded from the list of requirements for a vehicle to be eligible to $7,500 worth of tax credits. With uncertainty among companies in the battery and materials industries substantially relieved, South Korea is using this as an opportunity to support local battery companies which aim to expand into the North American market. During a meeting with heads of battery makers on Friday, Trade Minister Lee Chang-yang announced that the government will offer 7 trillion Korean won, or roughly $5.3 billion, in financial support over the next 5 years to local battery firms that are seeking to build factories in North America. This includes lowering lending rates by up to 1 percentage point and insurance premiums by up to 20%. The government is also seeking ways to enter a new market by developing lithium iron phosphate, or LFP, batteries, which the firms have already started developing and some are even preparing for production. Accordingly, the government plans to start new projects related to LFP batteries worth 50 billion won, or roughly $38 million, to help the firms. Materials and mineral companies can look forward for more tax credits when making investments compared to before, as the tax reduction rate rose to 15% for large companies and to 25% for small and mid-sized firms. To boost the battery industry's competitiveness, the government is planning to build a so-called mother factory, a hub with advanced technology and facilities for research and development. Meanwhile, on Friday, the country's three major battery makers, LG Energy Solution, Samsung SDI, and SK On, also attend the meeting and pledge to invest a total of 1.6 trillion won, or roughly $1.2 billion over the next 5 years. 신하영, 아리랑 뉴스.
North Korea is yet to respond to regular contact using the cross-border communication line between the two Koreas. North Korea has today been unresponsive to calls made from the south via the cross-border communication line. According to Seoul's Ministry of Unification on Friday, North Korea did not respond to both the opening call at 9 a.m. and the closing call at 5 p.m. The regime has been unresponsive to the military hotline as well. The ministry said that as communication lines in the south works fine, it'll closely monitor the situation, including possible technical problems on the regime's end. The communication line was restored by the north in July 2021 after it had been severed for about a year. The line was also cut off in October last year before being restored soon after. Chief nuclear negotiators of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo met today in Seoul to address increasing nuclear and missile threats from North Korea. They issued the first joint statement under South Korea's Yoon administration. And in line with UNSC resolutions, they urged the international community to repatriate all North Korean workers abroad, as they could be helping to fund or support the regime's unlawful missile activities. Choi Min-jung reports.
The top nuclear envoys of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan reiterate their commitment to countering threats posed by North Korea to regional and global security. Seoul's Kim Gun, Washington's Sung Kim, and Tokyo's Takehiro Funakoshi met in Seoul on Friday and strongly condemned North Korea's repeated ballistic missile launches and its weapons development program.
North Korea is misguiding its people to believe that nuclear weapons are a magic wand that can solve all of its problems. On the contrary, North Korea's nuclear obsession is nothing more than a self-destructive boomerang.
The DPRK threat is a shared problem, and we are developing shared solutions to counter it. And of course, at the center of our efforts is our unwavering commitment to seeking complete denuclearization.
We strongly condemn these actions by North Korea as they pose a grave threat to the peace and security of the region and beyond.
In a joint statement, the three envoys highlighted the significance of fully implementing the UN Security Council resolutions, including the repatriation of all North Korean overseas workers. They urged UN member states to send all paid North Korean laborers earning income in their countries back to North Korea and ensure that no work authorizations are renewed or granted. The officials said that North Korean IT workers in particular are using fake identities to avoid UNSC sanctions and are helping to fund the North's weapons program, as they are reportedly funded by stealing and laundering funds, as well as gathering information through malicious cyber activities. The envoys also expressed serious concerns about the North's human rights violations, including the abductions of citizens from South Korea and Japan. They also stressed that they remain open to dialogue with North Korea, even amid Pyongyang's continued provocations. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
South Korea's ruling party now has a new floor leader, three-term lawmaker Yoon Jae-ok. Like Chairman Kim Ki-hyun, he is also deemed part of the pro-Yoon faction of the People Power Party. This as political parties zero in on the 2024 general elections. Our National Assembly correspondent Han Sung-woo has the details.
South Korea's ruling People Power Party has elected three-term lawmaker Yoon Jae-ok as its new floor leader to succeed fellow legislator Chu Ho-young. Representing a constituency in the conservative stronghold of Daegu City, Yoon bested four-term lawmaker Kim Ha-kyung for the post, claiming 65 out of the 109 votes cast by fellow People Power Party lawmakers on Friday. He will be serving a one-year term until next April, when the 2024 general elections will be held. The ruling party's aiming to secure a parliamentary majority next year at the National Assembly, which is currently held by the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea. In his acceptance speech, Yoon pledged to restore the public's trust in the ruling party and aid it to victory in the upcoming elections.
With the power of popular sentiment, I will block the giant opposition from running wild and restore political order so that we can regain the public's trust. Together, we will win next year's elections, truly complete the transition of power, and open wide a road leading to a new nation.
By parliamentary custom, the new floor leader will also be taking over as chairman of the National Assembly's House Steering Committee. Like party chairman Kim Ki-yeon, who was elected just 1 month ago, Yoon's deemed a loyalist to President Yoon Suk-yeol as well, having served key roles during his presidential campaign. Some observers say, though, there's the risk his undertaking as floor leader could reinforce views that the People Power Party's leadership is predominantly pro-Yoon and centered around lawmakers representing the Yeongnam region. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
Researchers here in Korea are reaffirming the health benefits of edible insects as great sources of dietary protein that is fundamental to overall muscle strength, especially for the elderly. Yoon-jin explains.
When we see elderly people spending their free time doing a variety of exercises, we admire their physical activeness and fitness. But for them, there may be some sadness that their bodies aren't the same as they used to be.
There was a time when I used to jump around, but now I walk like an old man.
The process of muscle weakening as a part of aging is called sarcopenia. But it has become a global trend to consider muscle atrophy as more of a disease than just a sign of aging. And diseases call for treatment. While there isn't a treatment for sarcopenia, local researchers have found that mealworm extract enhances muscle differentiation and alleviates muscle loss. Mealworm extract was applied to the muscle cells of laboratory mice. Compared to muscle cells that were not treated, results showed an enhancement of 60% in myogenin, a protein that is expressed early in skeletal muscle differentiation. The experiment also showed changes in the number of genes that influence muscle atrophy, collectively referred to as atrogenes. The muscle cells treated with mealworm extract showed a decrease of these proteins by 36%.
The scientific proof that these mealworms help alleviate muscle atrophy is significant because it allows the expansion of the use of edible insects as a medicinal additive.
The latest research finding was also published in the International Journal of Scientific Studies, Life. And the Rural Development Administration plans to further its findings by expanding clinical research into the use of edible insects. Once looked at with disgust, more edible insects backed by scientific findings are becoming recognized as health supplements. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
One of K-pop's most popular girl groups, Blackpink, will this weekend make a long-awaited return to Tokyo as part of their Born Pink World Tour. The girls are due to perform at the world-famous Tokyo Dome for the first time in 3 years on April 8th and 9th. Tickets for both dates sold out immediately, and due to high demand, officials said that they had to put more tickets on sale for seats with restricted view. There will also be a pop-up shop at Miyashita Park in the Shibuya area of Tokyo until April 10th. Fans will be able to watch music video clips, buy merchandise, and take pictures in a special photo zone.
Now that the rain has completely tapered off, clear skies are back in the forecast for this weekend. As for the temperatures, though, big fluctuations are expected. A surge of cold air from the north of the peninsula will make temperatures stay in single figures. Daytime readings will be hiking up to 14 and 17 degrees. Do expect wide temperature gaps. In the meantime, air quality won't be so good for central regions. This is due to a greater influx of fine dust from overseas, triggered by warm daytime conditions. For the Seoul metropolitan area, Gangwon-do and Chungcheong-do provinces, air quality will be standing in the bad category. For those in the area, it is highly recommended to refrain from outdoor activities. The rest of the country will see decent air quality. And sunny spells will dominate nationwide. Seoul and Daegu will be starting off at 3 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will jump to 14 degrees, Daejeon and Gwangju 16, Gyeongju will be topping out at 17 degrees. Another round of nationwide rain is in store for next Tuesday. Have a great weekend, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings us to the end of this Friday's newscast. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and a good night.
I'm live!
저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지. 텐션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.